Alongside conservatism, which we discussed in the previous lesson, the 19th century also saw the rise of liberalism. Like conservatism, it emerged in response to the Enlightenment and the political upheavals of the French Revolution. But liberalism took a very different perspective on government, society, and individual rights. Liberalism developed along two parallel tracks: political liberalism and economic liberalism. Political liberalism emphasized individual rights, constitutional government, and political freedoms, while economic liberalism promoted free markets, private property, and limited government intervention in the economy. Together, these two strands helped shape modern democratic and capitalist societies. After examining each of these forms of liberalism, we can turn to what became the most influential ideology of the 19th century: nationalism. Political liberalism is built on one fundamental principle: government must rest on the consent of the governed rather than on the divine right of kings or hereditary privilege. Its intellectual foundations can be traced to thinkers such as John Locke in England, who argued that governments derive their authority from the people and exist to protect natural rights, and Montesquieu and other Enlightenment philosophers in France, who advocated constitutional government and limitations on political power. The first major triumph of political liberalism came with the American Revolution, which combined Enlightenment ideals with British traditions of representative government. Many of the early stages of the French Revolution also reflected liberal principles, including demands for individual rights, equality before the law, and greater political participation. Liberal thinkers supported a range of principles designed to protect freedom and limit arbitrary power, including constitutional government, the rule of law, individual liberty, religious toleration, the separation of powers, and representative government. They believed that governments should operate according to established laws, respect the rights of citizens, and allow people a voice in political decision-making through elected representatives. Although liberals admired many republican ideals, most were not committed to abolishing monarchy altogether. Instead, they were generally willing to accept a limited constitutional monarch whose power was restrained by law and representative institutions, so long as that ruler governed fairly, respected individual rights, and helped maintain political stability. Liberals rejected the system of privileged social orders that characterized the old regime, particularly the special status enjoyed by the crown, the church, and the aristocracy. They argued that no individual or group should receive political power, legal advantages, or economic benefits solely because of birth or social rank. Instead, liberals advocated legal equality, insisting that all citizens should be subject to the same laws and possess the same civil rights. They sought to eliminate hereditary privilege and create societies in which advancement was based on merit, talent, and achievement rather than inherited status. 19th century liberals placed great importance on private property, viewing it as a foundation for both social stability and responsible citizenship. They believed that property owners were more likely to be independent, prudent, and invested in the well-being of society. Because property ownership was thought to encourage good judgment and a stake in public affairs, many liberals argued that political participation should be linked to property ownership. As a result, early liberals generally favored limited voting rights rather than universal suffrage and did not support government welfare programs, which they often viewed as too radical or potentially harmful to individual responsibility. Despite these limitations, liberalism played a crucial role in challenging absolutist rule, promoting constitutional government, and advancing principles of individual rights and legal equality that became the foundation of modern democratic societies. Economic liberalism emphasized free markets and minimal government interference in economic affairs. Its central principle was laissez-faire, a French phrase meaning "let it be," which reflected the belief that the economy functions best when individuals and businesses are free to pursue their own interests with little state intervention. Economic liberals opposed protectionist tariffs, government regulation, trade restrictions, and state control of industries, arguing that such policies hindered economic growth and individual initiative. Instead, they maintained that nations would achieve the greatest prosperity through free trade, open markets, and competition, which they believed encouraged efficiency, innovation, and wealth creation. These ideas became highly influential during the 19th century and helped shape the development of modern capitalist economies. The leading figure of economic liberalism was Adam Smith, whose landmark 900-page work, The Wealth of Nations, profoundly transformed economic thought and laid the intellectual foundation for modern capitalism. In this influential book, Smith challenged and largely dismantled the old mercantilist system of protectionism, which emphasized government control of trade and the accumulation of wealth through tariffs and restrictions. He explained how markets operate through the interactions of buyers and sellers, analyzed the forces of supply and demand, and explored the roles of labor, industry, and competition in generating economic growth and prosperity. Smith argued that individuals pursuing their own economic interests within a competitive marketplace often contribute to the general welfare through what he famously described as the invisible hand. For nearly 2 centuries, The Wealth of Nations remained the cornerstone of liberal economic theory and continued to influence economists, policymakers, and advocates of free market capitalism around the world. Later in the 19th century, John Stuart Mill developed a more moderate and socially conscious version of economic liberalism. While he continued to support the principles of laissez-faire and individual freedom, Mill believed that unrestricted markets alone could not solve all social problems. He argued that workers needed protection from exploitation, recognized trade unions as legitimate organizations that could defend laborers' interests, and advocated greater social and political reforms. Mill was also a pioneering supporter of women's rights, insisting that women deserved equal opportunities, legal rights, and political representation. In addition, he maintained that the working class should have a stronger political voice, reflecting his belief that a truly liberal society must expand participation and protect the rights of all citizens. These ideas helped bridge the gap between classical liberalism and the more reform-minded liberalism of the 20th century, laying important foundations for the development of modern welfare liberalism. Of all the major ideologies of the 19th century, nationalism became the most widely embraced and far-reaching. Unlike liberalism, which focused on individual rights and constitutional government, nationalism centered on a sense of collective identity and loyalty to a larger community. At its core, nationalism is based on devotion to the nation, a group of people who believe they share a common language, culture, history, traditions, and identity. Nationalists argued that people who belong to the same nation should be united politically and should have the right to govern themselves. This powerful idea inspired movements for national independence, political unification, and self-determination across Europe and the world, making nationalism one of the most influential forces in modern history. Before the French Revolution, most Europeans did not think of themselves primarily as members of a nation. Instead, their loyalties were usually directed toward more immediate and familiar communities, such as their village, their city, their feudal lord, their religious community, or the dynasty and ruler who governed them. Political boundaries often contained many different languages, cultures, and ethnic groups, and people rarely viewed themselves as part of a large, unified national community. As a result, a broad sense of national identity was uncommon. The upheavals of the French Revolution and the transformations of the 19th century would change this dramatically, encouraging millions of people to identify with larger national communities and fueling the rise of modern nationalism. The French Revolution helped transform the idea of political loyalty by proclaiming that the French people themselves constituted a nation, that the nation should govern itself, and that citizens, rather than kings, had the duty to defend the country. Revolutionary leaders argued that sovereignty belonged to the people, not to a monarch, and they mobilized large numbers of ordinary citizens to fight in defense of the nation. This marked a dramatic departure from the traditional dynastic states of the 18th century. During the Napoleonic Wars, these ideas spread across Europe. Other countries often adopted nationalist methods not because they embraced French ideals, but because necessity demanded it. To resist Napoleon's massive citizen armies, states such as Britain, Austria, Russia, Spain, and Prussia were compelled to draw upon broader segments of their populations for military service and support. In doing so, they encouraged a stronger sense of national identity and loyalty among their people, helping to accelerate the growth of nationalism throughout Europe. This transformation led to several important developments, including mass conscription, patriotic appeals to the population, and the widespread use of national symbols such as flags, anthems, and patriotic songs. Governments increasingly called upon ordinary citizens to serve in the military and support national causes, fostering a sense of shared purpose and collective identity. Political leaders appealed to patriotism rather than simple loyalty to a monarch, encouraging people to see themselves as members of a larger national community. As a result, individuals came to fight not merely for a king or ruling dynasty, but for what they believed to be their nation and its future. Over time, national identity became a deeply emotional force, capable of inspiring extraordinary sacrifice, unity, and political action, making nationalism one of the most powerful movements of the 19th century. Nationalism encouraged many peoples across Europe to seek political unity and self-determination. Germans, who were divided among dozens of independent states within the former Holy Roman Empire, increasingly sought to unite into a single German nation. Italians, fragmented among various kingdoms, duchies, and foreign-controlled territories, worked toward the creation of a unified Italian state. Greeks, living under the rule of the Ottoman Empire, drew upon nationalist ideals in their struggle for independence and the establishment of their own nation-state. Similarly, many Irish nationalists sought greater self-government or independence from British rule. Throughout the 19th century, nationalism inspired these and many other groups to pursue the creation of unified national states, reshaping the political map of Europe and becoming one of the most powerful forces for change in the modern era. As the 19th century progressed, nationalism began to develop more extreme and sometimes dangerous forms. Earlier nationalists had emphasized shared language, culture, and political self-determination, but many later nationalists increasingly defined nations in terms of blood, soil, and race. National identity came to be viewed not merely as a political or cultural bond, but as an inherited biological characteristic that supposedly distinguished one people from another. National symbols such as flags, anthems, and patriotic ceremonies continued to promote unity and pride, but they could also encourage feelings of superiority and exclusion. Some groups began to claim that their nation was naturally more advanced, civilized, or worthy than others. These beliefs were further reinforced by social Darwinism, a distorted application of Charles Darwin's theories of biological evolution to human societies. Social Darwinists argued that competition among nations and races was a natural struggle in which the strongest would survive and dominate. Such ideas helped justify imperialism, discrimination, and aggressive nationalism, contributing to international tensions that would become increasingly significant in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This evolution of nationalist thought contributed to the rise of racial nationalism, an ideology that viewed nations as if they were biological species locked in a struggle for survival and dominance. Influenced by social Darwinism, some nationalists argued that competition among peoples and nations was a natural law of human history. As a result, ideas about superior races, inferior peoples, and national destiny became increasingly common in political discourse. Advocates of these views claimed that certain nations or ethnic groups were inherently stronger, more capable, or more deserving of power than others. Such beliefs fostered prejudice, ethnic hostility, and a sense of national superiority that went far beyond earlier forms of cultural nationalism. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, these ideas helped shape the racial ideologies associated with imperialism, colonial expansion, and aggressive nationalism, contributing to some of the most destructive political movements and conflicts of the modern era. Liberalism, conservatism, romanticism, and nationalism all emerged from the same powerful historical forces: the Enlightenment, the French Revolution, and the Napoleonic Era. Each ideology was shaped by the dramatic political, social, and intellectual transformations of the late 18th and early 19th centuries, yet each offered a different vision for the future. Liberals emphasized individual rights, constitutional government, and economic freedom. Conservatives sought to preserve order, tradition, and established institutions. Romantics celebrated emotion, culture, history, and the human spirit as alternatives to the rationalism of the Enlightenment. Nationalists focused on the unity, identity, and self-determination of peoples who shared a common culture, language, or heritage. Despite their differences, all of these movements grappled with the same fundamental question: how should society be organized in the modern world? Their competing answers shaped the politics, culture, and conflicts of the 19th century and continue to influence the world today. In the next lesson, we will examine another major ideology that emerged from the forces of industrialization and nationalism and would profoundly affect global history: imperialism.